Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. As we all have discussed earlier today, the Congressman Walter Jones passed away yesterday after a brief illness, but some months since he's been serving in Congress. And in the process of reviewing his life, we have the privilege today to talk with someone who the recipient of his service, and that being Congressman Jones's service to the military personnel. And this is a topic I have discussed on numerous occasions, both with the congressman but also in general, and that is the work that the congressman has done for our men and women in uniform, in particular instances where, quite frankly, injustice or mistakes have been made. And today we're chatting with someone who has been the beneficiary of the congressman's oversight and participation. We have joining us United States Marine Corps Major Fred Galvin. He is United States Marine Corps retired, and he was the subject of some stories just recently, along with 6 other Marines who, for all intents and purposes, received a full exoneration of their charges as a result of action in Afghanistan. And the Major joins us this afternoon. We're recording it in the morning because he is working in Hawaii, and it works out well for his schedule to be pre-recorded. So with that as a quick background, Major, good afternoon to you. It's good morning as we speak, but good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Just say aloha, Lockwood, and thank you, mahalo.
Appreciate that. And of course, you are there in Hawaii, and I know that there's some time difference here, so this works out well for us as well. Major, the story that I was reading in both the Washington Post and, of course, Marine Corps Times by Andrew de Grand Prix, very telling story. If you will, quick background on that, and then your experience with Congressman Jones.
Well, 12 years ago, the 1st Marine Special Operations Task Force deployed from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I was the commanding officer. We set sail on ships that went to drop us off in Djibouti, and we flew into Afghanistan. And 12 years ago, next month, we were actually on a combat reconnaissance patrol in the very eastern portion of Afghanistan along the Pakistan border, and we were attacked first by a suicide car bomber that detonated a van full of explosives on our 2nd vehicle in the patrol, and then we were shot at on both sides of the road with groups of armed jihadists. And we did what the Marine Corps trained us to do. We stopped. We counterattacked and destroyed the enemy who was fighting us, and that happened at 9 o'clock in the morning. So what happened immediately after that was a complete false narrative, and that was fed to them by the Taliban. Within 20 minutes of that ambush, we had information in the international media that said that we pulled over, that we got out of our trucks, which never happened, that we were going door to door in these homes, killing women, children, elderly, and that we were drunk, and that we tried to cover it up by making it look like we were throwing grenades and caused some form of an explosion, and that we actually went back to the scene of the crime to delete photos of members of the media that were taking pictures and threatening them. And this whole canard boiled up and was sensationalized in not only the press, but there were riots that were taking place in that area of Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and people were threatening to saying death to America, death to Karzai, death to Bush. And so the president of Afghanistan at the time, President Hamid Karzai, put a lot of pressure that forced the generals to take the easy road, which was to throw us out of Afghanistan far before any investigation had been done. Actually, the investigator had conducted 1 day's worth of interviews, and he only had interviewed the first 2 vehicles on our patrol, and the unprecedented step to take us out and remove us from Afghanistan was taken over 3 weeks prior to that investigation being completed. So the intersection where Congressman Walter Jones and our unit had occurred was when we had been maligned in the press by multiple senior Army officers, and this was, several times using mainstream media, saying that we, had killed women and children and elderly, and this was a stain on our honor, and there was apologies on behalf of these Army senior officers. And I go back, we were the very first unit from the Marine Corps that was organized and deployed as in the Special Operations Command. So there was some resentment to that by the Army, and the Army's the preponderance of the Special Operations Forces. So, with that, there was no one at all in uniform standing up for the actions of our unit. In May of 2007, after an Army officer had publicly condemned us to a briefing at the Pentagon Press Corps, that Walter Jones had heard that, and to talk about the character of Congressman Walter Jones, that we were not even his constituents. We were not in contact with him or his office, nor anyone from our family or friends. It's just like the scripture says, he knew us before we knew him, and he had heard this outrageous slander and libel come out from the Army, and he objected to it, and he took a bold stand by going to the floor of the House of Representatives and making some very powerful remarks, which, showed his courage. And this was leading into an election cycle that there were other Marine cases that, such as the Haditha case, that another Congressman, Jack Murtha, had made some very disparaging comments about, and there's other cases in Hamdaniya, so it was very unpopular. And Congressman Jones, one thing I would say is I'm sure he was aware of political risk. If standing, we were accused of, falsely accused of allegedly killing 19 and wounding 50. So this was, at that time, the largest count of casualties of civilians. And then, he unhesitantly took a stand. He didn't have, all the details, and it was just something that here this last month we had been officially cleared in January of 2019 by the Department of the Navy, who released a statement that showed very clearly that the moral stand that Walter Jones said, that the presumption of innocence of these Marines has been removed and maligned by these Army officers who'd said that. I mean, he was proven to be correct almost 12 years later. He has been fighting for us this entire time, Lockwood.
Major, and I'm going to refer to you, of course, now granted retired, Major Fred Galvin with us, and United States Marine Corps retired, and we'll get some details on his future in just a few moments. But Major, remarking back to an article, a series of articles, as a matter of fact, by Andrew D. Grandpré, who now works for the Washington Post, in a most recent story just 2 weeks ago, noted that the Pentagon, the headline reads, Pentagon exonerates Marines blackballed by war crimes case. They doubt the gesture is sincere, by the way. But I think this is an important story. In talking with, or writing the story, Andrew de Grandpré noted that several members of Congress were supportive of your case. However, only one member of that committee or that group was more than willing to have his name publicly associated with that, and that was Congressman Jones. That struck me, that the congressman had that much confidence, but that much commitment to seeing a wrong righted. That impresses me. Your thoughts?
Yes, it does show the true character of Congressman Jones, and he's someone who is extraordinary to stand, against the grain.
Right.
And it's not very popular when, you take a bold stand like that. And when you talk about if someone's actions made a difference, there was 7 of us who were falsely accused. And when the Army made those statements, it wasn't just the Army. There was Marine four-star generals that made very derogatory statements publicly in the press. The Commandant of the Marine Corps at the time, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was a Marine at the time, General Peter Pace, General Conway, I mean, they had said they were very disappointed in the conduct of those Marines. This was in April 2007. So this, in our minds, as far as being able to get a fair shake, this wasn't heading to a civilian court where, there is some impartiality in the military. It's an up or out organization. So if you want to stay in and you want to continue to serve, you need to get promoted. And those who are promoting you are senior officers, and they're making, the two most senior Marine Corps officers are making public statements that are derogatory. And that was, that's factually had occurred. And, as unpopular as it may have been, because there's several bases that are in Congressman Walter Jones' third district with Camp Lejeune and Cherry Point, and the airfield there. But he took a stand and fought for us for 11 and a half years continuously.
He did the same thing in the case of Lieutenant Colonel John Brow and Major Brooks Gruber, both Marine Corps pilots aboard the Osprey in 2000. And again, and I've talked to staff. It was a hard-fought battle about the experiences in chatting with the Marine Corps Command as well as the Department of Defense and the Pentagon. And again, to your point a moment ago, it shows the character of Congressman Walter Jones. Our guest this afternoon, just for a few more minutes, and I'm going to take a quick break, but I want to get back to the future of our guest. We have joining us Major Fred Galvin, United States Marine Corps retired, and we're chatting with him about his experience with Congressman Jones. Fred, in talking about this story, and of course the experience you had, and you've clarified this for me, there's the Board of Correction of Naval Records. In essence, this is a clear, shall we say, clearing of your reputation, your record, etc. Am I correct on this? This basically, if you will, removes any of the charges that ever existed?
Yes, it does. And it is a clean slate, which I've asked that the Marine Corps being an up or out organization, I hit service limits, which forced me to be retired from the Marine Corps. And with this panel that will be meeting here in the near future to decide if I will get promoted now, I've asked to be able to go back into the Marine Corps. And one of my goals was, hopefully being able to continue to serve. And hopefully I was wanting, if the Marine Corps determines that I would be promoted, that Congressman Jones would be able to promote me. And we, the seven of us, owe so much to, his courage and his bold stand, because having those statements in the public, the world would have been a very different place for the seven of us and our families and those young children that look up to, their dads in the Marine Corps that were serving faithfully and courageously in battle that day.
Major Fred Galvin with us. And Major, let's look at your future now. What about your situation? And by the way, you shared with me that you are in a position where you can talk, shall use the word freely, about this event. What is your future at this point?
Yes, and I'm a man of faith, and I just believe, God's put me on this earth to do things for our national defense, and so I returned to serve with the Marine Corps, and hopefully I'll be able to be promoted and return to service if that's God's will. And I really owe a lot of debt of gratitude for Congressman Jones being used by God to make sure all this was happening. It wasn't, just like the case with the two officer pilots that you mentioned before, this was not a simple and easy case. There was a lot of resistance. And that panel that met last year, it was a petition that was sent to them, so there was not any. Congressman Jones had asked that the Department of the Navy allow me to be there present at a personal appearance, which was denied. So that was a very impartial board that had a government prosecutor assigned and a government defender assigned that know who represented on either side. We had no communication, and they found that what Congressman Jones had originally stood up and defended us was in fact true. It was uninfluenced panel inside the Pentagon of civilian senior leaders. So thank God that decision was made the right way.
Major Fred Galvin with us this afternoon. Major, the other 7 members, I gather, are pleased that their records have been expunged. Well, I shouldn't say expunged, but have been corrected. Going forward, I appreciate your time. I look forward to further conversations as more details become clear. I think this is an important story. And just to wrap it up with you, Major, you said, no, you're not his constituents, but all the members of the military in uniform, and I would argue their family members as well, in an odd sort of way, are the constituents of Congressman Jones, are they not?
Yes, and he's been very adamant about that. I know it really touched a nerve seeing some of these early casualties, and he really put that into action as a selfless leader. It's very, very near and dear to my heart that he stood for us that much, and God bless him and his wife Joanna and their family.
And the staff as well. Major, yes. Thank you very much for being with us. Again, our guest this afternoon, Major Fred Galvin, here on Viewpoints. Major, have a good day.
You too, Lockwood. Thank you.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240.